Welcome to Advanced Learning Tutoring. This is the Biology playlist. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Ecology Key Words. An ecosystem is the interaction of a community of living organisms, biotic, with the non-living, abiotic. To survive and reproduce, organisms require a supply of materials from their surroundings and from other living organisms there. Plants in a community or habitat often compete with each other for light, space, water, and mineral ions. Animals often compete with each other for food, mates, and territory. Interdependence. Within a community, each species depends on the other species for food, shelter, pollination, seed dispersal. If one species is removed, it can affect the whole community. A stable community is one where all the species and the environmental factors are in balance so that the population sizes remain fairly constant. Examples of abiotic factors, the non-living factors, include light intensity, temperature, moisture levels, soil pH and mineral content, wind intensity and direction, carbon dioxide levels for plants, and oxygen levels for aquatic animals. Examples of biotic, or the living factors, are availability of food, new predators arriving, new pathogens, one species outcompeting another, so the numbers no longer are sufficient to breed. Adaptations. Organisms adapt to enable them to survive in the conditions in which they would normally live. Extremophiles are organisms that live in extreme environments, for example high temperature, pressure or salt concentration. Bacteria living in deep sea vents are extremophiles. An example of a plant that has adapted to its surroundings is the cactus. It has shallow, widespread roots to absorb surface water, spikes to deter predators, thick, waxy skin to prevent the loss of moisture from the plant. An example of an animal that has adapted to its surroundings is the polar bear. It is white for camouflage. It has small, rounded ears to prevent heat loss to the surroundings. It has large, furry feet to enable it to walk on the ice and the snow, and has long claws for tearing apart prey. Levels of organisation. Feeding relationships within a community can be represented by food chains. All food chains begin with a producer which synthesizes molecules. This is usually a green plant or algae which makes glucose by photosynthesis. Following on from the producer, you have the primary consumer, usually a herbivore. Following the primary consumer, you have a secondary consumer, then a tertiary consumer. Following the tertiary consumer, you may have a decomposer that feeds on the remains of the tertiary consumer. An apex predator is one of those that is at the top of the food chain. A pyramid of number can be used to represent the number of organisms in the habitat. The bar of each level in your pyramid will represent the number of organisms. For example, one oak tree will have a much narrower bar than many caterpillars that feed on that oak tree. Sampling techniques can be used to investigate the population size of a common species within a habitat, or to investigate the effect of a factor on the distribution of a species. Sampling techniques include the use of a quadrat or a transect. A quadrat is a metal grid divided into squares, A transect is similar to a long tape measure that can be rolled out across a habitat. To use a quadrat to measure the population of species in a school field. Choose a starting point on the school field. Use random numbers to generate a set of coordinates to place your first quadrat. It is important that this stage is done randomly. Count the number of different plant species within this quadrat. Return to your starting position. Repeat steps 2 and 3 a further 9 times using different random numbers. Calculate a mean. Do this by adding up all of the numbers of each species and divide by the number of trials. Measure the area of the field and divide this by the area of the quadrat. Multiply by the mean to estimate the total population in the field. If you were investigating the effect of light intensity on the presence of a species within that habitat, you would use a light meter to note down the light levels in each particular area. For example, starting at the base of a tree where it might be shaded to the area of the centre of the field where there may be more sun. We would expect to see a higher reading of species towards the centre of the field than in the shaded area of the tree. This is due to a lack of light. Plants need light for photosynthesis to produce glucose. This glucose then used in respiration to release energy for growth. Therefore, in the shady areas, there will be a lack of plant growth. Materials are cycled in our environment. Water and carbon can be cycled through a number of different steps. In the water cycle, we have the processes of evaporation, condensation, transport, precipitation, surface runoff, infiltration, and transpiration. Evaporation is when water turns from a liquid to a gas. Energy from the sun evaporates water from all places on the earth. Condensation is when water cools and converts from a gas to a liquid, forming clouds. In transport, water within the clouds can be transported miles and miles by the wind. Precipitation is the falling of water as rain, snow, hail, and sleet. Surface runoff. Water will be absorbed into the ground after precipitation, but if a large volume of water falls, some of this water can run along the surface of the ground. Infiltration is when water that has fallen as precipitation is absorbed into the ground and then stored within underground rocks. Transpiration. Plants maintain a constant stream of water to their leaves for transport and support. A reminder, transpiration is the movement of water through a plant in the xylem tissue. Some water is evaporated from the leaves to allow water to be pulled up from the soil. In the carbon cycle, we have the processes of photosynthesis, respiration, combustion, decay, and decomposition. The molecules which we focus on in the carbon cycle are carbon dioxide, glucose, which has the chemical formula C6H12O6, and fuels, which are hydrocarbons containing only carbon and hydrogen atoms, such as methane. In photosynthesis, carbon starts as carbon dioxide, which is taken into plants to produce glucose. This glucose, which is now in plants then use this glucose in the process of respiration to produce carbon dioxide. Animals will eat plants, therefore taking the glucose from the plant, ingested into the animal. They use this in respiration and use this glucose to produce carbon dioxide, which is exhaled from the animal. Combustion of fuels is the burning of fuels in oxygen. The carbon starts as the fuel source and ends as carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a product of combustion. When plants and animals die, microorganisms will feed on the plants and animals and decompose. When microorganisms feed on these animals during the process of decomposition, the microorganisms respire, taking in the glucose from the dead plant and animal, releasing carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Photosynthesis is the only process in the carbon cycle that takes in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Decomposition. Decomposition is the breakdown of dead matter, which is often called rotting. Decomposing bacteria and fungi are organisms that help the process of decomposition. There are a number of factors that affect the rate of decay. Temperature. Lower temperatures, decomposing organisms are less active. Water and availability of oxygen. Without oxygen, microorganisms are not able to respire. This is why when you put food in your freezer at an extreme low temperature, microorganisms are unable to survive and are much less active. The use of compost by gardeners and farmers. Gardeners and farmers improve the quality of their soil by adding compost or manure. Compost is made from dead plants, and manure is the waste from animals. Compost and manure are broken down into minerals by decomposing bacteria and fungi, as well as by other organisms such as worms. Adding compost or manure helps recycle minerals so that they are absorbed by new plants and used in growth. Compost and manure also improve the quality of soil by increasing aeration and water retention. Inorganic fertilizers can also be used on soil to overcome specific mineral deficiencies. One key element which is recycled is nitrogen. This element is needed by plants to make proteins in order to grow and repair themselves. Plants cannot absorb nitrogen gas from the atmosphere and need it to be provided as nitrate ions in the soil. Anaerobic decay produces methane gas. Biogas generators can be used to produce methane gas as a fuel. Investigating decay and decomposition. Investigate the effect of temperature on the rate of decay of fresh milk by measuring pH change. As milk decays, its pH reduces. This is because bacteria present in milk carry out a chemical process to provide them with energy. This process converts lactose sugar in the milk to lactic acid, and producing this acid reduces the pH of milk. The following steps can be used to carry out this investigation. Place 20 millilitres of fresh milk into 3 beakers. Decide the 3 temperatures you will investigate, and write these onto the sides of the beakers. For example, 5, 20 and 35 degrees Celsius. Use universal indicator paper or solution to determine the pH of the milk in the 3 beakers. Cover each beaker in cling film and incubate at the appropriate temperature. Use universal indicator paper or solution to determine the pH of the milk in the 3 beakers after 24, 48 and 72 hours. The pH change at 5 degrees remains fairly constant, which is why we refrigerate milk. At 20 and 35 degrees Celsius, the pH change dramatically reduces, with the greatest decrease in pH at 35 degrees Celsius. Human population growth. The human population has increased due to a number of reasons. Better healthcare, so people are living longer, new medicines becoming available, preventing people from dying of previously fatal diseases. Farmers are able to produce more food using new breeds, and that some religions do not permit the use of contraception. There are a number of impacts due to the population increase. The management of waste and pollution produced increases. Polluting an ecosystem can harm or kill the organisms within it. Deforestation, to build new houses or grow crops, destroys habitats, which reduces biodiversity. And peat bog destruction. Peat bogs are carbon sinks, which are important stores of carbon. When burned, they release large amounts of carbon dioxide, contributing to global warming. Waste management includes the pollution of water, air, and the use of land. Water pollution, or eutrophication, involves the following steps. Fertilizer runoff from fields causes nutrient load-up in nearby streams and rivers. Aquatic plant growth increases. Algae blooms prevent sunlight reaching other plants beneath the surface of the water. The plants die and oxygen in the water is depleted due to the lack of photosynthesis. Oxygen levels become so low that no life is possible. Air pollution. Combustion of fossil fuels release carbon dioxide, which contribute to global warming. Sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides are released into the atmosphere due to the impurities in fuels, causing acid rain. And carbon particulates, or soot, can be released due to the incomplete combustion of fuels, causing smog or global dimming. The use of land. The larger the population, the more land is required. More houses, resources, food, and more waste is produced. Less space for animals and plants, reducing biodiversity. The greenhouse effect and global warming. The greenhouse effect. Without the greenhouse effect, the average Earth temperature would be approximately -18 degrees Celsius. So the greenhouse effect is a good thing. Ultraviolet radiation is emitted from the sun. Greenhouse gases trap reflected radiation from the Earth, causing a warming effect. The increase in the greenhouse gases increase the effect of global warming. The greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, water vapour, and methane. The following are consequences of global warming. Melting of polar ice caps, causing a rise in the sea level. Weather patterns change. Animals migrate towards the poles to find more suitable habitats. A change in soil pH due to flooding, impacting plant growth. Many species could become extinct. Deforestation and peat bog destruction. Deforestation is the process of removing areas of woodland for houses or growing crops. It destroys habitats and kills many species. Peat bog destruction. Bogs are wet areas of land without trees and hence have low levels of nutrients. Peat is formed from partially decayed plants. It takes a long time to form and is a non-renewable energy resource. Peat was previously removed to use on gardens or to burn as a fuel. Peat bogs are carbon sinks, a store of carbon. If all peat is removed and burned, this would release large volumes of carbon dioxide, contributing to global warming. Food security. Due to the human population growth, there is going to be a lower availability of food. Food security is reduced by the increase in human population, changing diets, new pests and pathogens, global warming, increased costs of farming, and armed conflicts. The following are sustainable methods to increase food security. Intensive farming, using machines and high-yield crops. Arable farming, which is only growing one crop, can lead to a lack of nutrients in the soil and reduce biodiversity. Organic farming, where no pesticides or machines, and rotating the crops planted each year to avoid monoculturing. Sustainable fisheries, the number of fish caught and killed does not exceed the birth of new fish. Size of gaps in nets are increased, and the introduction of fishing quotas. Biotechnology, the alteration of living things. For example, the production of mycoprotein. Maintaining biodiversity. Biodiversity is the variety of plant and animal species within a habitat. Methods of maintaining biodiversity are as follows: the use of breeding programs to preserve endangered species, the protection and development of endangered habitats, replanting hedgerows, reducing deforestation and the release of greenhouse gases, recycling waste rather than dumping in landfill. The role of biotechnology includes genetic modification, selective breeding, and mycoprotein production. Genetic modification is when scientists identify genes that control some characteristics. The genes are removed with enzymes and inserted into the genome of other species, known as transgenic. Selective breeding is when scientists choose desired characteristics in parents to produce offspring. This is repeated over generations, but can lead to inbreeding, which can lead to genetic disorders. In mycoprotein production, a fungus known as fusarium produces a protein, grown in a large container called a fermenter. pH and temperature are maintained at the optimum. Sterile oxygen is added to ensure aerobic respiration, and glucose syrup is added as a food source. The impact of environmental change. To evaluate the impact of environmental changes on the distribution of species in an ecosystem, we look at the environmental changes that affect the distribution of species, which can include temperature, availability of water, and the composition of atmospheric gases. The changes may be seasonal, geographic, or caused by human interaction. Human interaction. Humans have been cutting down trees for thousands of years, for land, farming and building, and for wood to be used as a fuel. The deforestation can have local effects, such as a reduction in food and shelter for animals. It can also have a more widespread effect, such as changes in rainfall and temperature. These changes may change the distribution of bird species. Air pollution. The combustion of fossil fuels release a number of pollutant gases. Sulfur dioxide is released if the fuel contains sulfur. This gas contributes to acid rain, and some organisms are unable to survive in these conditions.